One of the best ways to prevent chronic diseases and to stay healthy is to have good nutrition. Today, we are pleased to have Charlene Chen, a registered dietitian at the Vancouver General Hospital, to talk about cooking for your liver. Charlene has decades of clinical nutrition experience from diverse backgrounds, and her topic today is such a popular and important topic for all liver disease patients. Please join me in welcoming Charlene Chen.
Thank you for joining us, Charlene. It's a pleasure to have you here. What is a general healthy diet for somebody living with liver disease?
Mhm. Well, the liver is an amazing organ that has multiple functions, and many things can go wrong with it. But it is also very resilient. So unless it is, uh, advanced disease, you generally do not need a very specialized diet. It is a good idea to follow a healthy, balanced diet in general to preserve the organ and to maximize the function of the organ. But what is a healthy, balanced diet, you may ask? Well, today I have a food plate called the Healthy Plate that is modeled after the Canada's Food Guide that was released last year in 2019. As you can see, the plate contains 3 macronutrients, 3 different food groups, and 50% of the plate is vegetables. 25% of the plate is what we call carbohydrates, which includes whole grains. And what is not shown here is that fruits and root vegetables are actually carbohydrates as well. Okay. And you have the third component, which is meat and alternates, and that will include your protein items such as lean meats, seafood, your tofu, your edamame, and soybeans. Okay, these are just examples of dairy as well as eggs and cheese. I cannot stress how important it is to understand the basics of nutrition so that in the event that you do need to modify your diet, you understand what the effects they provide in helping your liver function better. The liver is mostly an organ that actually does a lot of triaging, packaging, as well as processing of the foods that you've eaten. So whatever you eat will have an effect on the organ that processes everything that comes through. In general, a healthy balanced diet for liver disease that is not too advanced generally has lower saturated fat. So you'll eat the protein, but generally, for example, you may want to eat pork loin instead of pork shoulder. And I'm being very specific because a lot of times people hear about balanced diet, but they really want examples of what that looks like. Um, Lower sodium, so for the Asian population that we have, you may want to have a little bit less soy sauce and salty sauces in general and go for the lighter sauces. Fruits and vegetables, well, that is pretty self-explanatory, and the key is to have more of it because a lot of times when we eat out, the representation of what is served in restaurants are not representative of what is on a healthy plate. That's a mouthful to start.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So, to kind of expand on that, what if a patient has fatty liver disease? Do you have any specific recommendations of what they should eat in that case?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Fatty liver disease is a little bit different than the cirrhosis and non-alcoholic liver disease. It is basically a disease related more or less to obesity and sedentary lifestyle. So we have seen an explosion in fatty liver disease in the past few decades because as a whole, we have gotten bigger and more sedentary as a population. So fatty liver disease, the diet that would be recommended in most literatures would be a lower carbohydrate, higher vegetables, and higher protein. Okay, so again, I'm going to show you how that fits into this healthy plate diet. In general, lower carb may seem a little confusing because how low is low and how high is high. If you keep to 25% of your plate, that is what we consider moderate to lower carb. So you're already following something that would be healthy for your liver. However, carbohydrate is considered a fuel. So if you are very active and you work out every day and you're under the age of 30 and perhaps you work in a construction job, the modern day athletes, I would call it, you may need a bit more carbohydrates. So it is very lifestyle dependent on the amount of activities that you would have. Okay. However, if you have a desk job, like most of us do, the modern lifestyle diet only allows you to have 25% or less. And this is very key because it is very easy to say, well, my grandparents used to eat a big plate of pasta. Why is it that we can't do that anymore, right? But they used to work on the farm for 8 hours a day, and nowadays it is a challenge even to get an hour a day of exercise in for most people. So for fatty liver, carbohydrate is key in controlling the amount of fat that gets accumulated in your liver, because carbohydrate turns into fat when it's not used up completely. Excessive carbohydrate is accumulated as fat in the liver.
Great. And what about, so again, to expand, for families that eat a lot of Asian foods, which I guess typically include a lot of salt, for example, do you have recommendations on how to mitigate that in a healthy diet?
Yes, yes. It's interesting about salt because in our culture, salt and fat are actually, it's considered actually taste stimulants. So salt actually begets more salt, and it actually begets more eating. So whenever food is overly salty, or if you think of fried food, it's, you know, overly fatty, they actually make you want to eat more. It stimulates the taste. And we're at a point in population when we are surrounded by a very obesogenic environment, and we have lots of food. And if you walk down the street, there's probably 20 restaurants just waiting for you to pick one. So we don't necessarily eat because we're hungry. We eat sometimes because of taste stimulation. So one of the key ways to avoid too much sodium in your diet, which, you know, makes you eat extras, is to cook at home so that you can control the amount of salt and the amount of sauces that you put into your diet. And that includes the amount of marinades. You know, if you're marinating meat before you cook them, you may want to use a low sodium soy sauce or other types of flavoring besides just the sauce. So for example, Mrs. Dash, herbs and spices, and garlic powder and onion powder. Some of these herbal powders do not have sodium. It is actually the soy sauce, the oyster sauce, and the hoisin sauce, and perhaps in the Western world, the barbecue sauce and some of the steak sauce and the ketchup that has a lot more sodium and that type of taste stimulants.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what about if you have fatty liver disease and you're looking to lose weight? Are there any specific recommendations surrounding that?
It's a great question. And I'm going to circle back again to the carbohydrate, which, you know, everything it works well when you have a balance. So here we're not asking for people to cut out the carbohydrate because we do need a certain amount of fuel in our diet. But the key is to look at the lifestyle that our grandparents have, for example, and look at your lifestyle now. If you're not somebody that has a very active lifestyle, you may want to consider looking closer at how much carbohydrates you eat, because extra carbohydrates turn into fat. So it's not necessarily the fat that you eat that turns into fat. It is the extra rice and the extra noodles and the extra cookies and the extra muffins and the extra donuts that you eat that you don't burn off that gets deposited in the liver. And pretty soon, a nice, you know, a nice liver that burns a lot of calories and processes things gets turned into a storage organ full of fat cells, and then it cannot process what it's supposed to do. So that is the danger of eating a high carb diet without exercising. Like I said, if you're eating a fairly high carb diet, we all have those cravings for a slice of cake, some ice cream sometimes. Make sure you exercise. And the recommendation for exercise is generally 30 to 60 days or 30 to 60 minutes a day, every day, if possible. And that's just the minimum. So if you want to do more, be my guest. Yes.
Okay, great. And then the last question in this topic was, what if I have fatty liver disease but I'm not overweight? Would there be specific recommendations or similarly focus on the balance?
That's a great question. That is a question I received twice last year when I was speaking on this topic. And it is fairly prevalent in the Asian population because the Asian BMI, and that stands for Body Mass Index, which is generally more of a Caucasian index based on your height and your weight. But for smaller Asians, Asians who have smaller bone structure, like myself, there are studies that show even when you're not overweight, you could be BMI of 23 or more. Okay, so overweight is when you exceed BMI of 25. Even if you're just between 23 and 25, there is a chance that you don't look overweight, but that you actually could be overweight in terms of body composition of fat mass. So the best way to do that, to make sure that you're metabolizing the extra carbohydrates that are getting deposited as liver as fat deposits, is to exercise daily, because exercise uses up all the extra calories. Okay, so this is not about weight loss. This is just about metabolizing the extra food that's in your system. And exercise also builds muscle mass, even walking, because when you're walking, you're bench pressing your own body weight. So you're producing muscle mass, and that in itself burns off the fat when you're sleeping. So exercise when you're not overweight but have some concerns about fatty liver. You want to eat, again, just the right amount of carbohydrates, but not excessive. And you want to have some form of exercise every day so that you're not just sitting in front of a computer, you're actually using your body and working out so that your body can use up the fat that's in your system. And one last tip for fatty liver for people that are not overweight. I know it's a very stealth situation and is quite worrisome because you can't see it. And people may not even think that you have an issue, but you're concerned, is to make sure that when you eat a healthy, higher protein, lots of vegetable, moderate carbohydrate diet, that you don't snack all day. Our culture has gotten to the point where we're snacking sometimes every 2 to 3 hours. And there is a place for that with people with advanced cirrhosis when they can't hold their glycogen or carbohydrate stores. But that is for people with advanced cirrhosis. With people with fatty liver disease, it's the opposite. You actually want to make sure that you have a 3 to 4 hour minimum fasting time between each meal. So again, you can metabolize the carbohydrate and fat that you've had from the meal previous.
Great. This actually leads well into the next question, which is, what should I eat if I have stable cirrhosis? How is that different than fatty liver?
Yes, stable cirrhosis, again, has different dimensions. In general, stable cirrhosis, we do recommend that you have higher protein. And I can explain about protein because we've gone into details about the carbohydrate, not too much sodium. And it's more of a balanced diet with higher protein and less sodium, as well as less saturated fat. Stable cirrhosis can mean that your body has a lot of scar tissue. So if you think of your liver as an engine, but let's say your liver has 50,000 different little engines that are doing the work of your digestion, detoxification, and triaging. But when the scars over the cells, those cells are not functional anymore. So in effect, you may have less cells that are able to work for you. So you really do not want to stress those remaining cells out by adding too much unnecessarily extra stimulants that we've just talked about, such as extra salt and extra saturated fat, which takes a lot of energy for the liver to break down and metabolize and store. So fats are good. I want to make sure that we all know that, because fats should make up 30% of your macronutrients in your diet. But the kind of fats that you may want to choose are things like avocado. You may want to choose your olive oils and your grapeseed oil for stir frying, and avoid the solid fats such as saturated fats as well as the hydrogenated fats. And fried foods generally have a lot of hydrogenated fats.
Great, thank
Thank you.
you. So the next question is, should I have herbal products to detoxify my liver?
Oh, yes, the great question. So this is an interesting question because the liver itself is a detoxifying agent. Okay, it is a detoxifying organ. So why do we want to add extra load to an organ that is starting to fail? And in many instances, one may not know how much it's failing until it's 90% failed completely. So here you are, you have this organ that is not functioning that well, yet you're adding extra herbal substance for it to digest. So that just actually adds to the load of the liver. So if you can just think of all your different organs of your body as, I mean, we're kind of like a factory. We have different stations in our body, and the liver is, I would say, the main digestive organ. And if it's not working as well and you're adding extra things to it, it actually makes it worse. So unless you are taking some vitamins and minerals, which are fine, that's approved by your physicians and dietitians and pharmacists, I would recommend that you stay away from herbal products in general because your liver is already detoxifying itself. It really just needs things that we may take for granted in this decade. It needs rest. It needs stress management. It needs for you to give it some TLC, to drink water, to feed it good food that's not too salty, not too fatty, just nice, light plain foods that you can make at home most days, and to avoid alcohol because alcohol is also very toxic to the organ to process.
Great. Okay, and our last question is, what should I eat before and after a liver transplant?
Great question, since I'm a transplant dietitian. If you ever are at the point where you need a transplant, you will be seen by a team of professionals, highly skilled professionals, including a liver transplant dietitian, and she will provide a 1.5-hour consultation for you. It is very individualized and very specific, so it's not possible for me to speak to what a good diet would be, but it would be along the lines of what we discussed based on your symptoms. So if you had certain type of symptoms that had to deal with your bile, or you're getting ascites, or some of those symptoms, the dietitian will work with you to manage those symptoms until it is your turn to get a liver transplant. Now, post-transplant, the great thing is that you get another chance at life, and you get a chance at leading a healthy diet, which again comes back to this balanced diet. And again, we think it's so boring because it is so basic. But after transplant, once you're healed from the surgery, ideally we would recommend that you follow a balanced diet again, with an eye that you don't eat too much carbohydrate, so that you don't make what is now a second chance at life. You can preserve the liver and the gift of life that you've been given. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I just have last question. This is from myself.
Okay.
So in terms of all the recommendations you've given, they're really good. Do you have any resources that you can recommend that anyone can maybe search up on the internet or be provided with, so we can actually read and see what foods fit into all the
that's a great
categories?
Question. Well, in BC, we are fortunate to have healthbc.org. It's healthlinkbc.org. Or is it healthlink?
HealthLinkBC, yes.
.ca. And it's funded by the Ministry of Health, and they do have a website as well as a dietitian, pharmacist, nurse, and a nurse navigator who can help you with some of your common questions. And if you need to download a low sodium diet, for example, those would be credible resources that you can go to.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's
It's
been
a pleasure to be here. Thank you.